everyone, my name is Vina, aka Miss WOC Reader, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm just following up on my 2023 most anticipated reads because I had done a video, well it was like more like a series of videos with like little shorts in a playlist of most anticipated 2023 releases. I did that last December into January, and then earlier this year I did a video following up on the first half of those reads to tell you what my impressions were. And I realized I actually did get a good chunk of the ones that I was anticipating read in the beginning of the year. So now I'm back in the second half of the year because I'm all done with those anticipated reads and I wanted to give you my thoughts. So I'm a little hesitant when I make those types of videos about anticipated releases because I find my most anticipated releases usually end up being among my most disappointing. Like, I don't know if it's partially because I just build up so much hype in my head for them, but, or maybe it's just like the buzz or like the cover, like I end up getting disappointed quite frequently with those most anticipated releases. The point where I wasn't even sure last year if I was going to do it, and then I ended up doing it anyway. And I definitely had my share of disappointments, but I also had some that I really did enjoy. So like I said, I only have a few left from that list. I will link the previous video so you can see what my thoughts were about the other ones. So let's get into it because one of the ones that I had first read from that list was Family Lore. And Family Lore was so hyped. I think everybody was just super excited about it because we love Elizabeth Acevedo's writing. And this was such a very different project for her, and I think a lot of people are like, yeah, well I know it was adult, so of course I was expecting them to be adult. I wasn't expecting her YA, but I think people truly were expecting this to read like older versions of her YA characters, and she surprised people by going in a different direction and not doing that. Like, they don't read anything like her previous books. This is in a non-linear format for one, and there's many different perspectives you're looking into, to the point where it took me a little bit of time to really get into this story because there were certain perspectives I'm like, what the hell am I reading? And then like the whole concept is basically this matriarch in this family, she has the ability to predict deaths. So she tells her family she had this prediction, she decides to throw this living wake, and now they're just kind of waiting like for her to die. And we're seeing like interviews from different members of the family, and because they are a part of the same family, at times their voices do sound similar. So I know for me, like I was reading the audiobook, but then I had to keep going in to the ebook to look over it or to reread sections. But there was a lot in here that I really did enjoy. I think too, as somebody who comes from a Caribbean family, there is a lot of, and I even heard like her say it at the event because I got to see one of the Family Lore launch events, and she said there's a lot of stuff in here that is very distinctly Caribbean, and I really did feel that on the page. There were certain members of this family that reminded me of my own family, and there was just a lot for me to identify with, especially because I was also going through like a parental loss at the time that I read this, like in that weird period where you're like waiting for them to die and you're not sure what it is. So I could definitely relate to that aspect as well, and just the reflecting on the past, which is something that I've done a lot this year with my family, and listening to their different stories and hearing them speak on different events. So Family Lore, I still think about so many different things in this book, and one of my best friends is currently reading it. So it's going to be one that I'm going to be discussing for a while. So overall, I did really enjoy this, despite having a little bit of a rocky start trying to get into it. And As always, I'm going to continue reading books by Elizabeth Acevedo because she does not disappoint. So, The Sun and the Void. I found this very interesting because there was a lot of controversy on TikTok about this book, and I just don't understand why. Like, I remember reaching out to Angela from the Literature Science Alliance and just being like, have you seen this? Because I don't understand why. Especially because she was the only one at the time who I also knew who had read the book, and since she has family in Venezuela, she can provide that insight. Like, this was a book that I was very much anticipating just because you don't get a lot of fantasy that's inspired by South America. And like, I was listening to the author talk because she is of mixed heritage. Her mom is from the Andes region and her dad is from the Caribbean coastal region of Venezuela. My family also has roots on my father's side in the Caribbean coastal region of Venezuela. Like, their roots started there and then they migrated to Trinidad. And there is a lot of Venezuelan influence on Trinidadian culture. So all of that and how these different cultures are shaped by different groups just fascinates me. And I like seeing different perspectives like that in a fantasy and just a different take on it. But I think there's a problem in that publishing really pushes the own voices aspect, and people don't let these stories be the fantasies they are. This is not Venezuela, this is not Colombia, this is a fantasy world inspired by those places, and these are not the indigenous people of those countries she's talking about. These are people kind of inspired by those groups, but they are a fantastical people, which is why you have antlers and tails and stuff like that. And people were on TikTok were claiming she was like mocking indigenous people by having them have like tails and antlers, and people calling them ugly, and people just sharing anti-indigenous sentiments. Yes, people were sharing anti-indigenous sentiments in the book because there's a lot of anti-indigenous sentiments in South America, just like across the board, and that was something she wanted to touch upon in her fantasy. So I don't understand what the disconnect was there, because she also had the people who were darker skinned and lived more along the coastal region who were representative of the African enslaved people in society. So I like that she took things from her real culture and brought it into this fantastical world, but I don't understand where the breakdown was in the interpretation of what was going on here. Of course, people are going to, in high society, are going to be anti-indigenous the same way they are in our real world. I saw it among my own family when I visited South America earlier this year, and I remember in college working with a grad student who was a part of the Yanomami tribe, and it was very interesting just hearing about his experience because he did not grow up in the culture. His mom was from there, and then she had come away, married his father, and then she was so homesick she went back and just left him behind. So we were like, I was helping him along with some people from the Latin American Student Association. We were helping collect clothes and supplies for the people in his mother's village, and just to hear how these people identify, because they don't identify with Venezuelans, even though they are living in Venezuela. They have a very separate, distinct culture, and this group is completely isolated from the rest of the country. They are in their own little space. So I don't know what people were on with not being able to understand what this book was about. I really enjoyed a lot about the book. The only thing that killed it for me was the pacing. It would have very interesting stuff, but then it would be long and drawn out. Like, for me, the hardest part of this book to get through was the first 30%, because it it felt like it was going on and on and on and on, but not much was really happening. And then as we start getting towards the middle, stuff starts happening, but then sometimes the pace would slow down again. And like there was different interesting stuff going on. I liked the mineral based magic system, and I definitely do want to read the next book in the series. I think for me, like, I just am hoping the pacing is a little bit tighter. I think this book could have used a good editor, just to tighten up certain spots of it. But other than that, I do think it's worth the read. It just might end up being like a slow read for you. The Splinter in the Sky. So this was a sci-fi, and I'm not great with sci-fi reads. Like, I just have a struggle with them and holding my attention. And this book was fine. It wasn't amazing for me, and I'm having a hard time really remembering what happened right now in this book, other than they were fighting this colonial like society like that was ruling over them, and we have a main character who is really like into tea brewing, who ends up having to be like a secret spy for them. Like the excitement just wasn't there for me. It just read incredibly okay. And then last but not least, this book went through a lot of changes from the time I put it on my list to when I finally got to read the finished product, because for one, it started off like with the title Spirit of the Slayer, and it was set in like a college environment, but then it ended up turning into Sign of the Slayer, got a total recover, and they ended up saying she was a high school student. And I don't understand why they did that, because she was still 18, and it felt like they were writing her like as if she was a college student anyways. I don't understand that, but I know publishing doesn't like to have college students a lot, and like she gets pulled out of the high school environment anyway fairly early into the book, so I don't know why that was a thing that needed to be switched. But this book, it took me like a few chapters to get into. Like those first chapters, there was a lot going on, and I just felt like we were thrown into the action. So it took me a little bit of time to really click, especially because there was this white girl in the beginning of the book, and like it felt like we were giving her a pat on the back for wanting to go to an HBCU, and it's like, no. I'm not even gonna get into why that is a problem. If you know, you know. But it like I didn't like that part, and like that alone could have made me put down the book. But luckily I kept going. I do think parts of it were trying to be a little too about Buffy. Like there were a lot of Buffy mentions that gave it kind of like that 2000s feel. And I tried to watch Buffy recently because I missed it it was before my time, and then when everybody was watching it in like the 2000s and like I was not watching it. And then I tried watching it like earlier this year on Hulu, and I'm just like, I watched I think the first 2 episodes, and I think the first 2 episodes, and I'm just like, there's a lot of stuff here that just feels very, very 90s, and it's not, I don't have the nostalgia to continue. So, but anyway, Sign of the Slayer, used to be like Buffy and a couple of other projects, and we're following this girl named Raven, who basically finds out she's a vampire slayer and gets sucked into this special academy where she's going to train to be an agent for this secret society. And it was just a little bit too long. I think if it would have been like 100 pages shorter and more concise, it would have been better. I still had a really good time with it. I liked that she was a very voicey character. I feel like we don't get a lot of characters in YA right now that have a strong and distinct voice and a strong and distinct personality. So I really liked that. There were a lot of things that I personally love in urban fantasy that was present in this book. You know, like some of the obligatory scenes that I really enjoy. And I think it was really fun, and we need more of like those fun types of fantasies. Like, yes, she was going through a lot because she did go through like a great loss, and I feel like we could have maybe spent like a little bit more time in her grief, because she did end up getting like thrust into this world right away and did not have the chance to process certain things. But for the most part, this was a good time, and it has me ready to read the next one. So those were the books that I had to finish reading for this 2023 most anticipated read project. Let me know if you read any of these books and if you had any thoughts about them. And if you like this video, make sure and hit that like button. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!